Welcome, friend. You made it here, not because you were searching for answers or trying to fix anything, but simply because the night felt long enough that you needed a quieter place to rest. Right now, nothing is required of you. You don't need to focus. You don't need to understand. You don't even need to stay awake. Just let the sound of this voice be something gentle in the background, like a dim lamp left on in the next room. If you'd like, take a moment to notice where you are listening from. The room, the time, the quiet details you usually overlook. And if it feels natural, imagine sharing that place and hour with others who are listening too. Different cities, different nights, all arriving here for the same reason: to let the day loosen its grip. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Then you can forget about everything else. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tonight, you're not chasing enlightenment. You're not solving problems. You're simply listening to old stories that were never meant to be rushed through. Stories passed down not to impress the mind, but to quiet it. Long ago, in the mountains surrounding an ancient monastery, autumn arrived slowly without ceremony. The monks didn't mark it on calendars. They felt it in the air, in the longer shadows, in the way sound carried differently through the courtyard. At the center of that courtyard stood an old ginkgo tree. Each year its leaves turned gold all at once, as if the tree had been holding its breath and finally decided to exhale. Pilgrims traveled long distances just to stand beneath it, watching the leaves fall, convinced they were witnessing something rare and important. One morning, a young monk noticed the abbot sweeping beneath the tree. Golden leaves covered the ground almost as quickly as they were cleared away. The monk, new to practice and eager to show his understanding, approached his teacher. "Master," he said, "why do you sweep when the wind will only bring more leaves? Isn't this wasted effort?" The abbot didn't answer right away. He continued sweeping slow and steady, as if the question had simply joined the sound of the broom. The young monk waited, certain he had made a clever point. A few nights later, a storm moved through the mountains. Wind tore through the courtyard, stripping every remaining leaf from the tree. By morning, the ground lay buried beneath a thick carpet of gold. The monks stood silently, feeling the suddenness of change. But the abbot was already there, broom in hand. He didn't try to restore what had been lost. Instead, he swept narrow paths through the fallen leaves, one leading to the meditation hall, one to the well, one to the gate. The courtyard became something new, not less beautiful, just different. Watching this, the young monk finally understood. The sweeping had never been about winning against the wind. It was about meeting each moment exactly as it arrived. You may recognize this in your own life. The way you tidy a space, knowing it will become cluttered again. The way you try to calm your thoughts even though they always return. The way you keep showing up, even when nothing stays finished for long. Zen was never about stopping the leaves from falling. It was about learning how to sweep without resentment. As you rest here tonight, you don't need to clear your mind. You don't need to solve tomorrow. You're simply sweeping a small path through the day, making room to lie down. And that is more than enough. Night deepens as you move farther from the courtyard, following a narrow corridor that smells faintly of wood smoke and thyme. The monastery settles into itself the way an old house does after everyone has gone to bed. Nothing dramatic happens. Things simply grow quieter, heavier, more honest. You enter a small hall where a single oil lamp burns. Its flame wavers slightly, not from wind, but from the simple act of existing. The walls hold no decorations worth commenting on. There are no banners, no elaborate symbols, nothing competing for your attention. The emptiness feels intentional rather than lacking. An old monk sits near the wall, legs folded, spine relaxed but upright. He is not meditating in the way people imagine meditation should look. His eyes are open, his posture is casual. If you didn't know better, you might assume he was simply resting, passing time, or perhaps quietly forgetting what he meant to do next. You sit nearby without being told to. The floor is cool through your clothing. Your body adjusts in small ways, shifting weight, releasing tension without asking permission from your mind. After a long while, you notice something uncomfortable. Your thoughts have not slowed down at all. If anything, they seem louder in the quiet. Old conversations replay. Small regrets wander in uninvited. Plans for tomorrow tap gently, then insistently at the edges of your attention. You wonder if you are doing something wrong. The monk speaks without looking at you. Listening, he asks. You hesitate, then nod. It feels like a trick question. To what you ask. He gestures vaguely at the space between you. Whatever shows up, you try. You listen to the faint crackle of the lamp, the distant sound of wind brushing the outer walls. The quiet noise your own body makes when it breathes shifts exists, and still the thoughts keep talking. I can't stop my mind, you admit. The monk smiles slightly, the way someone smiles when hearing a very old concern expressed in a very familiar way. Why would you want to? He asks. That lands strangely. You've never considered the possibility that stopping the mind might not be the goal. You've spent years assuming peace arrives when thinking finally shuts up and leaves you alone. The monk reaches for a small cup beside him and pours tea from a kettle that has somehow remained warm. He does not offer you any yet. He watches the steam rise and vanish. Thoughts are like guests, he says. Some polite, some loud, some that stay too long. But the house is not the guests. You sit with that. The idea feels simple, almost suspiciously so. He continues, when you try to throw them out, they knock harder. When you argue with them, they bring friends. You imagine your own mind as a crowded room. Voices overlapping each one, convinced it has something important to say. You see how often you've tried to manage it by force, like a host shouting over the noise instead of letting the party wind down on its own. Historians still argue whether early Zen teachers framed these teachings deliberately as anti-technique or whether the simplicity emerged naturally through oral tradition. Either way, the message endured because it matched lived experience. The monk finally hands you the cup. It is warm grounding. You hold it carefully, noticing how your hands instinctively adjust to the heat. No instructions required. Peace, he says, is not the absence of movement. It's the absence of resistance. That feels important enough to remember, but you don't rush to memorize it. You let it sit the way the tea sits in your hands. You notice your breathing again. It hasn't changed much, but your relationship to it has. You're no longer trying to breathe correctly. You're simply aware that breathing is happening without your supervision. Thoughts still pass through. A memory from earlier today, a random image that makes no sense, a half-formed worry that dissolves before finishing its sentence. None of them demand action. You realize something mildly ironic. The moment you stop trying to control the mind is the moment it becomes easier to sit with. The monk watches you notice this and says nothing. Zen teachers were famously economical with encouragement. If something works, it doesn't need applause. You sit together in silence. Minutes pass, or maybe longer. Time feels less measurable here, less eager to be tracked. Eventually, the monk stands. His joints protest softly, but he doesn't comment on it. He places the empty cups aside and nods once, as if closing a conversation that never formally opened. As he leaves, you remain seated. You don't feel enlightened. You don't feel transformed. But you do feel slightly less at war with yourself, which tonight feels like more than enough. The long night stretches on. Thoughts come and go like distant footsteps in a hallway. You no longer chase them. You let them pass, knowing the house itself remains still. Your body grows heavier. The floor supports you without complaint. The silence does not demand anything, and somewhere inside that quiet rest begins to arrive on its own schedule. The path leading away from the hall bends gently downhill as if it prefers cooperation over efficiency. You follow it without effort, your feet finding their way on packed earth and scattered pine needles. The monastery behind you fades into the quiet, not disappearing, just becoming less relevant. At the bottom of the slope, a river moves through the valley. It doesn't rush, but it never stops. Water slides around stones smoothed by years of contact, creating a sound that feels both constant and new. No two moments of it are the same, yet none feel out of place. An elder from a nearby village often comes here at dusk. He has lived long enough to notice how the body gradually slows while the mind refuses to follow. At night, when he tries to rest, memories appear without invitation. Old conversations replay themselves with improved dialogue. Worries about his children drift in, wearing different disguises, but carrying the same weight. He once believed that peace would arrive only when his thoughts finally learned to behave. Tonight he stands beside the river with a teacher who knows this place well. The teacher does not carry anything that marks him as important. No special robe, no dramatic posture. He looks like someone who simply happened to stop walking. I try to sit in silence. The elder says his voice calm but tired. But the quieter it gets, the louder my thoughts become. It feels like I'm failing at something simple. The teacher listens without interruption. Then he gestures toward the river. "Watch," he says. You watch with them. Leaves float past, spinning briefly before continuing downstream. The surface breaks around stones, reforms, then breaks again. Light reflects and disappears. "Could you stop it?" the teacher asks. "If you stepped in and tried to hold the water still with your hands." The elder imagines it, slipping, splashing, mud rising where clarity once lived. "No," he says. "I would only make a mess." The teacher nods. The mind works the same way. They stand together in silence. The river keeps moving. No commentary, no correction. You don't need to enter the water. The teacher continues. Just sit on the bank. The words arrive softly, without instruction, hidden inside them. Not a command, an option. The elder feels something shift. He notices that while thoughts have been moving all this time, something else has remained unchanged. The awareness watching the river, the awareness hearing the sound, the awareness noticing the frustration. Historians still argue whether such teachings emerged as deliberate counterpoints to ritual-heavy traditions or evolved naturally through lived observation. Either way, the river metaphor appears across multiple early Zen lineages, suggesting it resonated deeply with ordinary experience. The elder closes his eyes. Thoughts appear. A memory of his wife laughing decades ago. A worry about his grandson. A random image with no clear origin. He does nothing with them. For the first time, he doesn't follow them downstream. He doesn't try to block them at the source. He simply sits where he is. His breathing slows without instruction. His shoulders drop. The river continues doing what rivers do. Later, when he returns home, the thoughts still visit. They knock at familiar hours. But now he recognizes them as movement, not failure. Sound not threat. You notice the same possibility opening for you now. Thoughts may still wander in, planning, remembering, judging, but none of that requires action. The night doesn't ask you to empty your mind. It only offers space wide enough to hold movement without conflict. You rest on the bank. The river flows. The long night continues untroubled by motion. Morning does not arrive suddenly here. It approaches slowly, testing the edges of the sky before committing. You are awake before the bell, not because you plan to be, but because your body seems to sense the change in light through the paper walls. The monastery is quiet in a different way now. Not the deep, settled silence of night, but a gentle expectancy. Like a room that knows something will happen soon, but isn't in a hurry to begin. You follow the smell of warm grain and faint smoke toward the kitchen. Inside, the space is simple and functional. Stone floors worn smooth by countless bare feet. Wooden shelves holding bowls that do not match. A single window fogged slightly by steam. At the center of the room, a large iron pot rests over a low fire. A monk stands there stirring. He has been awake for some time. His movements suggest familiarity rather than effort. The wooden spoon moves through the rice in slow circles, scraping the bottom of the pot, just enough to prevent sticking. Steam rises and disappears into the rafters. Nothing about this scene feels important, and yet nothing feels wasted. Many monks pass through this kitchen over the years. Some consider kitchen duty a distraction, something to endure, before returning to what they believe is real practice. They hurry, they multitask, they stir while thinking about sutras, enlightenment, or breakfast. This monk does none of that. He stirs when it is time to stir. He adjusts the fire when the fire needs adjusting. When the rice thickens, he notices. When it doesn't, he waits. His attention does not drift ahead of his hands. A senior teacher enters quietly and watches from the doorway. He does not announce himself. He simply observes the steam, the rhythm, the absence of unnecessary movement. After a long moment, the teacher steps closer. "What are you stirring?" he asks. The monk does not look up. His voice is calm, almost absent-minded. "The great ocean," he replies. The teacher pauses, then asks, "And what is it you hold in your hand?" The monk lifts the spoon slightly, just enough to acknowledge it. The dragon that stirs the depths. The teacher smiles once and leaves the kitchen without another word. Years later, people will ask this monk how awakening came to him. They expect stories of long retreats, intense effort, or dramatic insight. They expect a moment they can point to and admire. He will disappoint them gently. He will say only, I spent many years stirring rice. Historians still argue whether such stories were meant literally or symbolically, whether these exchanges actually occurred or were refined through generations of oral teaching. Zen has never seemed particularly concerned with settling the debate. The story endures because it continues to work. As you sit with this, you notice how often your own life is divided. Some moments labeled meaningful, others treated as obstacles to get through as efficiently as possible. You brush your teeth while thinking about the day ahead. You eat while scrolling or planning. You walk while mentally already somewhere else. The mind rarely stays where the body is. Zen practice quietly questions this habit, not with judgment but with curiosity. What happens when you stop dividing life into sacred and mundane? What changes when you bring the same attention to washing a bowl as you do to sitting in silence? The monk in the kitchen did not find the path somewhere else. He did not postpone practice until conditions improved. He did not wait for permission to begin. He discovered that the act itself was complete. The pot did not symbolize the ocean. It was the ocean. The spoon did not represent wisdom. It expressed it. This does not mean every task suddenly becomes blissful or easy. Rice still burns if ignored. Fires still need tending. Bodies still get tired. But something subtle shifts when effort is no longer divided between doing and wishing you were doing something else. You notice your own breathing again. It has been happening quietly this entire time. Inhales arriving, exhales leaving, no commentary required. The monk finishes stirring and covers the pot. He wipes the spoon clean, not hurriedly, not ceremonially, just thoroughly. Another monk enters and takes over without instruction. The work continues uninterrupted, like a river changing hands but not direction. Later, when the meal is served, no one praises the cook. No one asks about the ocean or the dragon. They eat, they chew, they swallow. The rice nourishes them whether they notice it or not. Zen teachers often warned against chasing special experiences. The danger, they said, is not failure but distraction. Looking elsewhere while life happens right where you are. You don't need to turn your life into a ritual. You don't need to rename your tasks. You only need to arrive where you already are. Tonight or this morning, or whenever you are listening, you are not asked to become someone new. You are simply invited to stay. Stay with the breath. Stay with the sound. Stay with the quiet act of being here. The long night does not rush. It allows room for pots and spoons for steam and silence for effort that does not strain. Your body settles a little more. Your thoughts wander, then return, then wander again. No correction needed. Somewhere rice is still being stirred. Somewhere a fire burns steadily. And somewhere within you the same quiet attention is already at work. The day unfolds without ceremony. There is no announcement that it has begun. No clear dividing line between night and morning. Light simply becomes more present, slipping into corners that were dark before revealing shapes that were already there. You walk along the outer edge of the monastery, where the land opens into a wide clearing. The grass is slightly damp, cool against your steps. Somewhere beyond the trees, birds move through their own routines, unconcerned with human schedules. A senior monk walks ahead of you. He does not speak, and you find that you do not need him to. His pace is steady, neither slow nor fast, the pace of someone with nowhere else to be. You reach a garden bordered by low stones. It is simple. No dramatic symmetry. No attempt to impress. just a patch of earth where vegetables grow in uneven rows, leaves still holding the quiet of early morning. The monk picks up a rake resting against the wall. He begins gathering fallen leaves from beneath a large maple tree. The leaves are brilliant with color reds, yellows, deep browns, but they are also already dry at the edges, already on their way out. He works carefully, forming neat lines in the gravel, then lifting the leaves into a pile near the tree's trunk. His attention is precise, almost tender. You can tell this is not his first autumn. After some time, another figure appears at the edge of the garden. An older teacher from a neighboring monastery watches quietly. His face carries the relaxed expression of someone who has seen many seasons pass and learned not to interfere too quickly. When the senior monk finishes, he steps back and gestures proudly toward the garden. "It is good," he says, allowing himself a small smile. The visiting teacher nods, almost. Before anyone can respond, he walks directly to the maple tree and gives its trunk a firm shake. Leaves fall instantly, cascading down in a sudden golden rain. They scatter across the gravel, covering the careful lines completely. The garden returns to gentle disorder, as if the previous effort had never happened. The visiting teacher dusts his hands lightly and says, "Now it is good." He leaves as quietly as he arrived. The senior monk stands still, rake in hand. For a brief moment, something tightens in his chest. Effort erased, work undone, pride exposed. Then it loosens. He begins raking again. Historians still argue whether this story reflects an actual encounter or a teaching refined through repetition. But its persistence within Zen tradition suggests that it captures something deeply familiar. You feel it too. The habit of wanting things finished, the urge to complete, to resolve, to arrive at a state where nothing more needs doing. The belief that peace exists somewhere beyond the present moment, waiting for everything to be in order. You see how often this shows up in your own life. Tidying a room, only to feel annoyed when it becomes messy again. Completing a task, but immediately thinking of the next one. Sitting down to rest, but mentally planning what comes after. The monk rakes, not to achieve permanence, but to meet what is present. The leaves fall again, not as a failure, but as a reminder. Impermanence is not an obstacle, it is the material. The Buddha taught that nothing conditioned lasts. Zen simply removes the argument. The garden is never finished, neither are you. This is not a problem to solve. It is a rhythm to learn. The monk rakes with less urgency now. His movements remain careful, but the need for completion has softened. He knows the leaves will fall again. He also knows the rake will still be there. You notice how your breathing mirrors this understanding. Inhales arrive, exhales leave. No breath stays, no breath needs to. The visiting teacher did not criticize the work. He only removed the illusion that it was done. Zen teachers often warned against attachment to outcomes, even good ones, especially good ones. The moment effort becomes about preserving a result, tension creeps in quietly. You lie back listening. Perhaps your body is already heavy. Perhaps sleep is hovering near the edges of awareness, not quite arriving, not needing to. Thoughts still pass through, but they feel less demanding now, like leaves drifting rather than alarms sounding. The garden remains, the tree remains, the rake moves again. Somewhere inside you, something similar happens. Effort loosens its grip. Attention stays without expectation. The long night continues wide enough to hold both the raking and the falling. The the doing and the undoing without choosing sides. As afternoon settles into the monastery, the air grows warmer but not heavy. Light drifts lazily across the stone walkways, catching on small imperfections. A crack here, a worn edge there. Nothing has been repaired in a long time, and nothing seems to be in a hurry to fall apart. You find yourself sitting near the outer wall where the monastery meets the forest. Cicadas hum faintly in the distance, their rhythm steady and unconcerned. The sound blends with your breathing until it becomes difficult to tell which is which. A visitor arrives from the nearby village. He is not a monk, just a man who has lived long enough to notice certain patterns repeating themselves. He bows awkwardly, unsure how deeply respect is required here, and speaks with a mix of confidence and embarrassment. "I have a temper," he says. "It's always been there. I was born with it. No matter how much I try to control myself, it comes back. It ruins things." The teacher, listening to him, does not nod or frown. He simply looks curious, the way someone looks when hearing a story they have heard many times but never grown tired of. "A temper," the teacher asks. "Interesting. May I see it?" The visitor blinks. "Right now, yes," the teacher says calmly. "Show it to me." The man looks inward, searching. He waits for the familiar heat, the tightening in his chest, the sharp edge behind his thoughts. But sitting here, surrounded by quiet, nothing appears. Well, he admits it's not here at the moment. It comes when I'm criticized, or when things don't go the way I expect. The teacher smiles gently. "So it comes and goes," he says. "That's unusual for something you were born with." The visitor frowns, considering this. If it were truly you, the teacher continues, wouldn't it stay all the time? The question lands without force. It doesn't accuse, it doesn't explain. It simply waits. The man feels something loosen. For the first time, he notices the space where anger is absent, not suppressed, not defeated, just not present. Historians still argue whether this exchange reflects an actual dialogue or a teaching shaped for clarity, but the insight it offers remains consistent with early Buddhist psychology. Anger, like weather, appears under certain conditions. It is not the sky. The visitor exhales slowly. His shoulders drop. "So, what do I do when it comes?" he asks. The teacher shrugs slightly. "Notice it," he says. "The same way you notice it isn't here now. No techniques are offered. No promises of permanent change. Just attention. You recognize this pattern in yourself. How often you've labeled emotions as identity. I am anxious, I am impatient, I am broken in this specific way. Zen invites a quieter rephrasing. Anxiety is here, impatience is visiting, nothing more. The visitor sits for a while longer, no longer trying to fix himself. He leaves later, without dramatic gratitude, just a simple bow and a thoughtful expression. The forest remains. The cicadas continue. Your breath moves in and out. Emotions may come tonight, or not. Either way, the space that notices them stays. The long night stretches on untouched by passing weather. Late afternoon leans gently toward evening, and the monastery grows quieter again, as if exhaling after the day's small movements. Shadows stretch across the wooden floors, and the sound of distant bells drifts in from somewhere beyond the hills, not calling you anywhere, just reminding you that time is still passing. You are invited into a small receiving room. It is modest, almost undecorated. A low table sits in the center. 2 cups rest upside down waiting. The walls are bare except for the marks left by years of weather and touch. Nothing here tries to impress you. A teacher enters and gestures for you to sit. His movements are unremarkable, which somehow makes them easier to trust. He does not ask why you've come. He assumes, perhaps correctly, that everyone comes for the same reason, even if they explain it differently. He begins to prepare tea. You notice how carefully he handles each step. The kettle, the leaves, the cups, not ceremonially but attentively. Water heats, steam rises. The room fills with a faint earthy scent. You feel the urge to speak, to explain yourself, to summarize what you already know, to demonstrate that you belong here. Before you can, he pours. The tea flows smoothly into your cup. It reaches the rim, and then without pause, it continues. Tea spills over the edge, runs down the side pools on the table, and drips onto the floor. You shift uncomfortably. "Master," you say finally, "the cup is full." He stops pouring and looks at you not with surprise but with mild curiosity. "Yes," he says, "it is." He sets the kettle down. "This cup," he continues, tapping it gently, "is like your mind, already full. How can anything new enter if there is no space?" The words are simple, almost obvious, and yet they land with unexpected weight. Historians still argue whether this story originated in China or Japan, and whether it referred to a specific student or a general teaching. What remains consistent is its quiet persistence across centuries of Zen instruction. You look at the cup. Tea continues to drip slowly from the table's edge. You think about how much you carry. Ideas, opinions, conclusions, stories about yourself and how you work. Even ideas about rest, about spirituality, about what calm is supposed to feel like. You realize how rarely you arrive anywhere empty-handed. The teacher does not ask you to discard what you know. He does not criticize learning. He simply points to fullness. Beginner's mind, he says softly, is not ignorance, it is openness. You sit with that. You notice how the mind prefers certainty, how it collects answers the way pockets collect small stones just in case they're needed later. And yet certainty weighs something down. You feel your breathing again. It has been steady all along. You didn't need to understand it for it to work. The teacher wipes the table calmly. The spilled tea leaves a faint stain darker than the wood, but not unpleasant. He turns the cup upright again and refills it this time, stopping before it overflows. Now he says there is room. You hold the cup. It is warm, solid, present. You think about how often you rush to interpret experiences before fully having them. How quickly you label moments as good or bad, successful or wasted, restful or not restful enough. Zen does not rush this way. It invites you to sit with what is before, deciding what it means. You take a sip. The tea tastes simple, slightly bitter, comforting. The teacher does not watch for your reaction. He does not check whether you approve. He trusts the tea to do what tea does. Outside, the light fades further. Evening settles in fully, now quiet and unannounced. You realize that emptying the cup is not something you do once. It happens again and again with each conversation. Each moment, each breath. You notice how thoughts still arise. Judgments too. But now they feel less solid, less entitled to permanence. They can come, they can go. The teacher stands and leaves the room without ceremony. The lesson does not linger in words. It stays in the sensation of holding the cup, the warmth, the space inside it. You remain seated for a while longer. You don't try to hold on to the insight. You don't rehearse it. You let it rest where it landed. The long night approaches again. bringing with it the same invitation. It always does. There is nothing you need to add. There is nothing you need to remove. Just enough space to let what is already here settle gently. A night returns softly as if it never truly left. The sky darkens without announcement, and the monastery accepts it the way an old body accepts sleep. Not resisting, not rushing, simply allowing. You find yourself near the edge of the grounds where a small hut sits alone among the trees. It is barely more than 4 walls and a roof assembled with practicality rather than comfort in mind. No decorations, no extra space, just enough shelter to keep rain and wind from becoming problems. A monk lives here. Few people know his name, and fewer still remember it later. Among villagers, he is known by a simple phrase, the stone-robed monk. Not because he wears stone, but because on the coldest nights when the mountain air bites through skin and bone, he carries a large, smooth stone against his chest. You see him now pacing slowly outside his hut. The night is cold enough that your breath fogs the air. Frost gathers quietly along the ground. The monk walks in small circles, holding the stone firmly, not straining, not dramatizing the effort. Just walking, step after step. The stone absorbs warmth from his body and in return reflects it back slowly. Not comfort exactly, but enough. Villagers who have glimpsed this scene in the past never quite knew what to make of it. Some felt pity, others felt admiration. A few assumed madness. None of those reactions seemed to concern the monk in the slightest. When he finishes his pacing, he sets the stone down carefully, as if thanking it, and returns to his hut. No commentary, no conclusion. Historians still argue whether this figure represents an actual individual or a composite of several ascetic monks whose lives were simplified into a single teaching story. Zen, as usual, has shown little interest in settling the matter. The teaching remains either way. You consider how often discomfort becomes an enemy in your own life. Cold, hunger, inconvenience, boredom. The immediate urge is always to remove them, escape them, or label them as failures of circumstance. The stone-robed monk does none of that. He does not complain about the lack of a robe. He does not curse the mountain air. He does not wait for conditions to improve before settling his body. He works with what is present. The stone in another context would be a burden, heavy, inflexible, useless for comfort. Here it becomes a source of warmth through simple cooperation. Zen teachers often pointed out that suffering increases, not because conditions are difficult, but because we argue with them. The cold is one thing, resenting the cold is another. You notice how this applies beyond physical discomfort. Emotional coldness, uncertainty, loneliness, waiting. Each one feels heavier when paired with resistance. The monk does not romanticize hardship. He does not seek it out. But when it arrives, he responds without complaint, without drama, without delay. The Buddha once taught that contentment is the greatest wealth. This monk embodies that teaching quietly, without slogans or sermons. Later, long after he is gone, the stone remains outside the hut. Weather smooths it further. Snow covers it in winter. Leaves gather around it in autumn. It becomes part of the landscape, asking nothing of anyone who passes. You imagine sitting beside it. The night is still. Your body rests where it is. Perhaps you feel warmth. Perhaps you feel coolness. Neither requires judgment. Your mind may reach for comparison. Others have more comfort. Others have less. Others seem to manage life better. Others struggle in ways you cannot see. The stone offers no comparison. It simply exists, available to whoever needs it, unbothered by opinion. You feel your breathing again, steady and quiet. Each inhale warms the body slightly. Each exhale releases what it can. Sleep begins to hover closer now, not as something you must enter, but as something that will arrive when the body is ready. You do not need to carry a stone tonight, but you can notice where you have been carrying unnecessary resistance, tightening against what already is. What if just for now you worked with the night instead of against it? The long night holds you without asking anything in return. The stone rests, the monk rests, and slowly so do you. The night grows deeper, and with it comes a quieter kind of attention. Not the alert focus of effort, but the soft awareness that remains when nothing urgent is left to do. The monastery settles into this state naturally. Doors close, lamps dim. Even the insects seem to lower their volume as if cooperating. You walk along a narrow path toward the village below, guided by moonlight rather than intention. The path feels familiar, though you don't remember walking it before. It curves gently, never demanding haste, never insisting you arrive anywhere in particular. Near the edge of the village, you notice a small house with a single window glowing softly in the dark. Inside lives an old farmer, someone who has spent his life working with seasons rather than plans. His days have been shaped by weather, soil, and patience. His nights are quiet, usually. Tonight, neighbors gather outside his home. Earlier that morning, the farmer's only horse wandered off. No signs of theft, no broken fence, just absence. For someone who depends on that horse for plowing fields and carrying supplies, the loss feels significant. The neighbors shake their heads and speak with heavy voices. How terrible, one says. Such bad luck. The farmer listens, nodding politely. How do you know, he asks. They exchange puzzled looks but say nothing more. The next day, the horse returns, followed by several wild horses from the hills. Strong, healthy animals that move with untamed confidence. The farmer's yard fills with unexpected abundance. The neighbors return this time smiling. What incredible good fortune, they say. You are blessed. The farmer listens again. How do you know, he asks. The following morning, his son attempts to train one of the wild horses. The animal throws him hard. The boy breaks his leg badly enough that he cannot stand. The neighbors gather once more, their voices hushed. How tragic, they say. Such bad luck. The farmer sits beside his son, adjusting the splint calm and steady. How do you know? He asks again. Days later, soldiers arrive in the village, conscripting young men for war. When they reach the farmer's house, they examine the son's injured leg and move on. He is unfit to fight, he stays home, alive. The neighbors say nothing this time. Historians still argue whether this story originated in Taoist or Zen circles, and whether it was meant as a literal account or a teaching parable. What matters is not its origin, but its persistence. You feel the truth of it settle quietly. How quickly the mind labels events. Good, bad, success, failure, relief, disaster. The labeling feels useful, even comforting, as if knowing how to judge something gives you control over it. But life rarely confirms those judgments. You think about moments from your own life that once felt like endings but later revealed themselves as beginnings. Or moments that felt like victories but carried consequences you hadn't anticipated. The farmer does not deny reality. He feels loss, he tends injuries, he responds appropriately. But he does not rush to declare meaning. Zen calls this don't know mind, not ignorance, but openness. The willingness to admit that the full shape of a moment has not yet revealed itself. You notice how this attitude feels in your body. Less tension in the chest, less urgency in the breath, a subtle permission to wait. The night itself models this. Darkness arrives without explanation. It does not announce whether it is good or bad. It simply becomes what it is, and in time it passes. You lie back now, perhaps already half asleep. Thoughts still appear. Memories, plans, judgments about how well you are resting. You don't argue with them. You don't agree with them either. You let them be unfinished stories, still in the process of revealing themselves. Somewhere the farmer sleeps. The horses breathe in the dark. The sun heals slowly, cell by cell, without commentary. The long night continues unconcerned with conclusions, and you rest within it, not needing to know what any of this will mean tomorrow. Night presses gently against the walls of the monastery, and somewhere within that quiet, a single lamp remains lit. Its glow comes from a small hut, set slightly apart from the main buildings, a place where little is kept and nothing is hidden. Inside, an old monk rests on a thin mat. He owns almost nothing. No stored food, no spare clothing, no objects meant to impress or reassure. His life has been shaped, deliberately pared down, until only what is necessary remains. This evening a thief slips quietly through the trees. He has chosen the hut because it looks unguarded. No dogs, no locks worth mentioning. He moves carefully, expecting resistance or surprise, perhaps even anger if he is discovered. Instead, he finds emptiness. The hut contains almost nothing. A bowl, a mat, a robe folded neatly at the side. No coins, no valuables. Nothing worth the risk he took to get here. The thief stands still, confused and disappointed. He has broken into many homes, but never one so thoroughly unprotected and so completely empty. He feels foolish, standing in the dark with nothing to take. From the shadows, the monk's voice emerges calm and untroubled. "You've come a long way," he says. "It would be a shame to leave empty-handed." The thief freezes. The monk rises slowly, careful not to startle him. He lifts his robe from the floor, folds it once more, and holds it out. "Please," he says, "take this. The night is cold." The thief does not know how to respond. No accusation comes, no anger, no demand for explanation. Only an offer given sincerely. He accepts the robe, bows awkwardly, and leaves without another word. The monk watches him go, then turns his attention to the open window. Moonlight spills across the floor, pale and steady. He smiles softly. "Pity," he murmurs, "that I could not give him the moon." Historians still argue whether this story reflects an actual encounter or a teaching refined over time, but Zen has preserved it with care, not for its novelty, but for its clarity. You feel the meaning settle without needing to be explained. The thief came to take something. The monk responded by giving what little he had. Not as a gesture of superiority, not as a test, simply as a natural response to what was present. You think about how tightly you hold to things. Objects, time, emotional boundaries, even grievances. How instinctively the body tightens at the idea of loss. Zen does not demand that you give everything away. It only asks you to notice what you believe defines your security. The monk's true wealth was not the robe. It was his ease, his lack of fear, his ability to meet intrusion with generosity rather than defense. The moon remains untouched. No one can steal it. No one can own it, and yet it offers its light freely without condition. You notice how this story changes the shape of the night around you. The room feels quieter. The air feels less crowded. You may feel sleep drawing closer now, like a tide that does not need to be forced. Thoughts still drift through, but they feel lighter, less insistent. You do not need to protect this moment. You do not need to hold on to it. Like the moonlight, it will arrive when the window is open and fade when it is time. The long night continues, generous and unguarded, offering rest without asking anything in return. The night is calm again, the kind of calm that feels earned rather than imposed. You sit near a low window where moonlight slips through thin paper, casting a pale rectangle across the floor. Outside, the world seems to have paused, not frozen, just resting between movements. You hear footsteps approach, slow and deliberate. A monk enters the room, carrying nothing with him. His robe is worn thin in places, softened by years of use rather than neglect. He does not greet you. He simply sits across from you, folding his legs without effort, as if the body already knows how to arrange itself. Between you, the moon hangs framed in the window. For a long time, neither of you speaks. The silence does not feel awkward. It feels shared. You notice how easily attention settles when it is not being directed. Finally, the monk gestures toward the window. "Do you see it?" he asks. You nod. "Of course you do." The moon is clear and bright, unhidden by cloud. "It looks close to night, you say." The monk smiles faintly. "Yes." And yet he says no matter how close it appears, it remains where it is. He stands, moves to the window, and slides it open a few inches. Cool air enters the room, carrying the scent of night flowers and distant earth. If someone pointed at the moon, he continues, extending his finger upward, and you stared only at the finger. What would you miss? The moon, you answer. The monk lowers his hand. Words he says are fingers. He returns to his seat and the silence resumes. Historians still argue whether this teaching arose as a response to over-scholastic interpretations of Buddhist texts or as a natural correction within oral traditions. Either way, the metaphor endured because it addressed a common human habit. You consider how often you mistake descriptions for experience, how easily the mind becomes absorbed in explanations, labels, and commentary, while the thing itself waits quietly in the background. You think of calm, of peace, of awakening. How often you've tried to imagine them, define them, measure your distance from them. And yet the moon does not need description to shine. The monk notices your attention drifting and speaks again, gently. "When you are thirsty," he says, "does a description of water satisfy you?" You smile slightly. "No." "And when you sleep," he continues, "does knowing the science of sleep help you rest?" You shake your head. Then why, he asks softly, "Do you think understanding life will replace living it?" The question does not demand an answer. It opens a space. You feel your body again, the weight of it against the floor, the slow, steady rise and fall of breath, the way your eyes soften when they are no longer searching for meaning. Zen teachers often warned against clinging to teachings the way one clings to possessions. Even truth, when held too tightly, becomes an obstacle. The monk stands and gestures toward the window once more. The moon has shifted slightly, now continuing its path without regard for your conversation. "You don't need to think about it," he says. "Just look. You do." There is no insight that arrives, no conclusion, just light reflected from a distant surface traveling across empty space to meet your eyes. And somehow that is enough. You notice how this quiet seeing extends beyond the moon. Sounds arrive and pass, sensations flicker and fade, thoughts appear and dissolve. None of them ask to be named. You begin to feel heavy, not with fatigue exactly, but with a pleasant sinking, as if the body is remembering how to rest on its own. The monk leaves without saying goodbye. His footsteps fade. The window remains open just enough to let the night breathe. You do not chase the lesson. You do not try to remember the words precisely. They were only fingers anyway. What remains is the seeing. The long night stretches on, illuminated by something you cannot hold, explain, or lose. And slowly, gently, you rest. Night has settled fully now, the kind that feels thick and protective, as though it has wrapped the monastery in a quiet agreement to pause. You walk slowly through a narrow corridor, your footsteps softened by age-worn boards that seem to understand the need for discretion. A small room opens to your left. Inside, a single candle burns on a low table, its flame steady, neither struggling nor dramatic. A man sits cross-legged nearby, his posture relaxed but attentive, as if he has learned how to sit without arguing with his body. He is known among the monks as someone with a temper. Not the loud, explosive kind, but the sharp, simmering sort that rises quickly when challenged. He has tried many ways to manage it. Silence, discipline, self-control. None of them have worked the way he hoped. Tonight he has come to see a teacher. "I lose myself when anger comes," he says quietly. "I say things I regret. I hurt people. I tell myself I will do better, but the same thing happens again." The teacher listens without interruption. His expression remains open, curious, rather than concerned. "Can you show me your anger?" the teacher asks. The man hesitates. He searches his chest, his jaw, his hands. He waits for the familiar tightening, the heat, the surge. But sitting here with the candle flickering softly, nothing appears. "It's not here right now," he admits. The teacher nods. "Interesting." The man frowns. "It comes when I'm criticized, or when I feel disrespected." So the teacher says it depends on conditions. "Yes," the man replies. The teacher leans slightly forward. "Then how can it be you?" The question lands gently without accusation. The man sits with it, feeling something shift in the space behind his thoughts. If anger were truly you, the teacher continues, would it not be present all the time? The man breathes out slowly. For the first time, he notices the absence itself. The space where anger is not. Historians still argue whether dialogues like this reflect literal conversations or teaching stories shaped through repetition. But the insight they offer aligns closely with early Buddhist understanding of mind states. Anger arises. Anger fades. Awareness remains. The man feels a quiet relief, not because anger has been defeated, but because it has been seen differently. No longer an identity, just a visitor. "So what should I do when it comes back?" he asks. The teacher smiles slightly. "Notice it," he says. "The same way you are noticing its absence now. No technique is given, no promise of permanence, just attention. You recognize this pattern in yourself, how often you define who you are by what passes through you. Anxiety, restlessness, sadness. You say, 'This is me,' when in truth, these are weather patterns, not the sky. The candle flickers. Wax gathers at its base. The man sits quietly for a while longer, no longer trying to solve himself. He leaves later without ceremony, bowing once his steps lighter than when he arrived. The room empties. The candle continues to burn. You remain listening to your own breath, steady and unforced. Thoughts may still arise. Emotions, too. None of them need to be chased away. The long night continues, spacious enough to hold every passing mood without being disturbed. The night feels steady now, no longer deepening, no longer shifting. It has reached a kind of balance, the way a lake becomes smooth after the wind has passed. You walk slowly along a narrow trail that circles the far edge of the monastery where few people go, unless they have a reason to be alone. At the end of the path stands a small shelter made of rough wood and stone. It leans slightly to one side as if it has grown tired of standing straight. Moss creeps along its base. The roof has been repaired many times, never perfectly, always just enough. A monk lives here. He is known quietly among the others as the stone-robe monk, not because of his clothing, but because during the coldest months when winter presses hard against the mountain, he wears no extra layers. Instead, he presses smooth river stones against his body, holding them beneath his robe until they warm, then rotating them slowly as the heat fades. You see him now seated just outside the shelter. The air is cold enough to sharpen the senses. Your breath forms small clouds. The monk's posture is relaxed, not braced against discomfort, not collapsing into it either. A single stone rests against his chest. Visitors who have seen this in the past often misunderstand. Some think it is a test of endurance. Others assume it is a form of punishment or denial. A few admire it as discipline. None of these interpretations seem to belong to the monk himself. He does not appear heroic. He does not appear resigned. He appears present. He lifts the stone, turns it in his hands, and places it back beneath his robe. The motion is careful and familiar, like someone adjusting a pillow in the night. Historians still argue whether such practices were literal methods used by ascetic monks or symbolic stories meant to convey deeper principles. Zen has rarely felt the need to separate the two. The teaching is not in the stone, it is in the relationship to it. You think about discomfort in your own life. The way the body reacts, first tightening, resisting, preparing to fight something that is already happening. Cold, pain, waiting, uncertainty, boredom, loneliness. Each one arrives and the mind immediately adds commentary. This shouldn't be happening. I can't stand this. How do I make it stop? The monk does none of that. He does not pretend the cold is pleasant. He does not romanticize hardship. He simply responds. Stone to chest, breath to body, attention to sensation. The Buddha once spoke of the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain itself. The second is the suffering we add by resisting it. The stone-robe monk removes the second arrow without ceremony. The cold is still cold, but it is no longer an enemy. You notice how this changes the atmosphere of the night. The quiet feels deeper, less fragile, as if the world does not require perfect conditions in order to be bearable. Later, the monk stands and places the stone beside the shelter. It joins several others already there, each one smooth from years of handling. He bows slightly, not to the stone but to the moment, and steps inside. The shelter offers little warmth. No fire, no insulation worth mentioning. And yet the monk sleeps. You imagine lying down like this with nothing to distract you from sensation. No screens, no noise, no escape routes. Just breath, body, and the slow passage of time. It sounds difficult. And then, strangely, it doesn't. Because you realize the monk is not trying to escape anything. He is cooperating with what is already here. He has stopped demanding that the night behave differently. Zen teachers often pointed out that freedom does not come from controlling conditions, but from understanding how to meet them. The stone does not change the temperature of the night. It changes the relationship to it. You feel your own body now, the temperature of the room, the weight of your limbs, the way the surface beneath you supports without effort. Perhaps there is a small discomfort somewhere, a tight shoulder, a restless leg, a lingering thought. You do not need to fix it. You can place your attention there the way the monk places the stone. Not to eliminate the sensation, but to meet it directly. The night remains quiet. Somewhere stones rest in a small pile. Somewhere a monk sleeps without argument. Somewhere within you resistance loosens its grip just enough. The long night holds everything evenly without preference. And slowly, gently, you continue to rest. The hour is late enough that even effort feels tired. The monastery rests in a way that only happens when nothing more is expected from the day. Lamps are low, doors are closed. The world has narrowed to simple shapes and gentle sounds. You sit alone in a small meditation hall. The floor is cool beneath you and the walls seem to hold the quiet carefully, as if they have learned how easily it can be disturbed. Outside, the night insects keep a soft rhythm, steady and unambitious. A monk enters and bows. He is younger than most of the teachers here, but his expression carries the weight of someone who has tried very hard for a very long time. He sits across from you and exhales slowly as if setting something heavy down. I've done everything I was told, he says after a while. I've studied, I've sat, I've disciplined myself. And still something feels unfinished. The teacher, listening to him, does not correct his posture or interrupt his list. He waits until the words settle. How long have you been trying? The teacher asks. Years, the monk replies. Every day. The teacher nods. And how long have you been alive? The monk pauses. All of it, he says. They sit quietly. The question hangs without needing an answer. Historians still argue whether stories like this were meant to criticize effort or to refine it. Zen never fully sided with either view. Instead, it pointed gently toward something else. The teacher stands and opens a small side door. Cool night air enters the hall, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Come, he says. They walk outside together. The path is dim-lit only by starlight. At the edge of the grounds, a wooden gate stands slightly open, its hinges worn smooth by years of use. Beyond the gate, the forest begins. The monk stops. Am I supposed to go out there? He asks. The teacher shakes his head. No, he says. Just notice the gate. The monk looks at it. It is simple, unlocked, unremarkable. He realizes he has passed it countless times without seeing it. I've been trying to break through, the monk says quietly. I didn't see that it was already open. The teacher smiles, not kindly or proudly, but neutrally, as if nothing unusual has happened. At the 11th hour, he says, effort exhausts itself. What remains is willingness. You feel the weight of that phrase without needing to hold it tightly. The monk stands there for a long time. He does not rush forward. He does not retreat. He simply allows himself to stop pushing, The gate does not move. It does not need to. You notice how often surrender is misunderstood as giving up, as failure, as weakness. Zen has always treated it differently, not as collapse, but as release. The monk bows once deeply, not to the teacher, not to the gate, but to the moment when effort finally loosens its grip. Later, when he returns to his cushion, his posture is the same. His breathing is the same. Nothing visible has changed. And yet the struggle has softened as if something unnecessary has been set down. The Buddha spoke often of the middle way, the path between indulgence and self-harm. Surrender lives there, misunderstood by both extremes. You notice this in your own body now, how effort has shaped your day, how even rest can become something you try to achieve. You do not need to open any gates tonight. You only need to notice which ones are no longer locked. The night remains wide and patient. The 11th hour passes quietly, and what could not be reached by force arrives on its own. You rest, not because you have earned it, but because nothing is stopping you anymore. This teaching appears again and again in Zen stories, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a quiet reversal. Students strive polish, refine, and discipline themselves until the will that drives them finally runs out of fuel. In that moment, awareness remains unforced and clear. Teachers have described this as falling backward into truth. Not leaping, not climbing, simply ceasing to brace yourself against what has always been holding you. There is a deep kindness in this. It means you do not have to perfect yourself before rest becomes available. You do not have to solve your life before peace is permitted. You do not have to reach the end of your thoughts before silence can be felt. The monk's years of effort were not wasted. They prepared him to recognize the moment when effort was no longer needed. Just as a long journey teaches you how to stop walking without guilt. You may notice something similar now. As the night deepens, the mind naturally loosens its grip. Plans blur, concerns lose their sharp edges. The body understands, before the mind does, that nothing more is required. This is not something you make happen, it is something you allow. Zen masters sometimes compared this to floating. If you thrash, you sink. If you trust the water, it carries you without instruction. So, tonight there is nothing to achieve, no insight to capture, no lesson to memorize. The door opens not because you push, but because you finally stop leaning against it. Breath continues on its own. The room holds you. The dark does not demand explanations. At the 11th hour, when striving grows quiet, presence steps forward without effort. And in that presence, rest arrives naturally, like sleep finding you when you stop looking for it. You can trust this simplicity. Nothing is missing. Nothing is late. The night does not rush you, and wisdom does not hurry. It waits until effort is done, then speaks softly, through stillness, reminding you that what you sought has been here quietly all along. You may sleep now, carried by what requires no striving, no fixing, no explanation. Nothing more is required. The night deepens further, not by becoming darker, but by becoming simpler. Sounds thin out. Even the spaces between thoughts feel wider, now like a lake after the wind has settled. Somewhere beyond the monastery walls, an owl calls once, and then goes silent. No answer follows. The call was not a question. It was simply part of the night speaking to itself. Inside a small room, lit by a single candle, an old teacher sits alone. He is not meditating in any formal sense. His eyes are half open, His hands rest loosely in his lap. If someone were to ask what he is doing, he would likely struggle to answer without misleading them. A student enters quietly and bows. This student is known for asking careful questions, the kind that show preparation and sincerity. "Master," the student says softly, "how do I know if I am practicing correctly?" The teacher does not look up immediately. He reaches out and adjusts the candle, turning the wick slightly so the flame steadies. Only then does he speak. "When you are asleep," he asks, "are you doing it correctly?" The student frowns. "I don't understand exactly," the teacher replies. Silence returns, not as an answer withheld, but as an answer complete. The student waits, expecting more. None comes. This is one of the quiet traps of spiritual life, turning practice into performance. Measuring progress, monitoring outcomes, asking the mind to grade its own absence. Zen has always resisted this tendency, not by offering reassurance, but by refusing to participate in the measurement at all. The teacher finally looks at the student. His gaze is clear, unburdened. When practice is real, he says, it does not report on itself. The student nods slowly, though something inside him still wants confirmation. The teacher continues, "You only begin to worry about doing it right when you've moved away from it." They sit together. The candle burns without concern for how well it illuminates the room. It simply burns. You may recognize this pattern in yourself, even now. The subtle checking, the quiet question of whether you are resting properly, listening deeply enough, letting go in the correct way. These questions arise from care, but they can quietly reintroduce effort where none is needed. Sleep does not improve when evaluated. Stillness does not deepen when monitored. Peace does not require supervision. The teacher stands and opens a window. Night air flows in cool and clean. The candle flickers but remains lit. "Notice," he says, "how the flame responds to the air." The student watches. The flame bends, adjusts, continues. It doesn't ask whether it is doing fire correctly. The teacher adds. The student exhales something unspoken, finally loosening. Zen stories often return to this point from many angles. The sound of rain, the movement of clouds, the act of breathing. None of them pause to confirm they are fulfilling their role. They simply are. This is why Zen masters so often pointed away from technique at the very moment students tried hardest to master one. Not because technique is wrong, but because clinging to it too tightly obscures what it was meant to reveal. The student bows again, this time without expectation. Later, when he leaves the room, he does not feel suddenly enlightened. He feels ordinary, unremarkable, and strangely relieved. That relief is important. It is the relief of no longer being responsible for the night. You feel this same permission now to stop checking, to stop adjusting, to stop wondering whether you are arriving somewhere you are already resting within. Breath happens, muscles soften, awareness remains wide and uncomplicated. The candle burns down. The teacher does not replace it. Darkness fills the room without resistance. This is how rest comes, not through refinement, but through trust. Trust that nothing essential is being missed. Trust that the body knows how to sleep without instruction. Trust that awareness does not disappear when effort stops. The mind may still wander. That is not a failure. Sounds may still arise. That is not a disturbance. Thoughts may drift through. That is not a problem. Practice is not something you do to make these things stop. Practice is what remains when you stop interfering. The night does not ask for your approval. It does not ask whether it is deep enough, quiet enough, complete enough. It simply unfolds. And as you allow yourself to unfold with it, without checking, without effort, without comparison, rest arrives naturally, like darkness filling a room when the candle is allowed to burn out on its own. Nothing more is required. You are not trying to fall asleep anymore. That quiet effort has faded. Instead, sleep has begun doing what it has always done best, arriving without asking permission. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell sounds once. It is not struck to mark time. No ceremony follows it. The sound rises, spreads, and dissolves into the night air, leaving nothing behind but the space where it was. A monk once said that the bell does not disappear. It simply returns to where it came from. You are doing the same. There is a story told quietly among Zen practitioners, usually late at night, usually without embellishment. It is about a master who was asked again and again to explain what remains when everything unnecessary is removed. Students pressed him for years. What is left when thoughts stop? What is left when the self falls away? What is left when even awareness grows quiet? One evening, after a long day of questions, the master said, "Nothing." He simply picked up his sandals and walked outside. The students followed at a respectful distance, careful not to interrupt. The night was cool. The ground still held the warmth of the day. Cicadas pulsed in slow, steady rhythm, as if counting nothing in particular. The master stopped near a small pond. Moonlight rested on the water without disturbing it. He pointed. That was all. No explanation followed. Some students were frustrated, others confused. One, however, felt something settle so deeply that no words could have reached it anyway. The pond was not demonstrating emptiness. It was not symbolizing stillness. It was simply being what it was, open, reflective, undisturbed by the moon it held without effort. Zen scholars still argue whether this story was meant as instruction or dismissal. Some say the master was teaching non-duality. Others believe he was gently ending a line of questioning that had outlived its usefulness. Either way, the students eventually returned to their rooms. The pond remained. This matters because the mind often treats rest as a project, something to complete, something to achieve before morning. But the body does not approach sleep this way. The body approaches sleep like the pond approaches moonlight. It receives what arrives. Earlier today, your body carried weight. It adjusted posture hundreds of times without comment. It breathed through moments you barely noticed. It regulated temperature, balance, and sensation with no need for supervision. It has not forgotten how to rest. What interferes is rarely exhaustion itself. It is usually commentary, the quiet narration that asks, "Am I sleeping yet?" The subtle tension that checks, "Why am I still awake?" The expectation that rest should feel a certain way. Zen training often begins by pointing out this interference, not to correct it, but to make it visible. A monk once complained to his teacher that he could not meditate because his legs hurt. The teacher replied, "Good. Now you know where your legs are." The monk waited for more instruction. None came. The pain did not mean the practice was failing. It meant experience was happening. In the same way, wakefulness does not mean rest has failed. It means awareness is still present. And awareness, when no longer tasked with solving anything, naturally softens. You may notice now that the edges of thought feel less defined. Images arise without insistence. Memory fragments appear and fade before forming full stories. This is not something you are doing. This is what happens when effort withdraws. Historians still argue whether early Zen masters intentionally taught methods for sleep, or whether sleep simply emerged as a side effect of deep non-striving. Texts are ambiguous. Instructions are sparse. What remains consistent is the emphasis on trust. Trust the body. Trust the night. Trust that nothing essential requires attention right now. A lesser-known teacher from the mountains of Korea once told his students, "When you are tired, lie down. When you are awake, notice that too. Do not argue with either." He was not known for dramatic awakenings or large followings. His monastery was small. His name appears rarely in formal records. But those who studied with him remembered how calm the nights felt, how uncomplicated rest became in his presence. You can sense that same simplicity now. Breathing is slower, not because you made it so, but because the body has decided there is no need to rush. The jaw loosens. The space behind the eyes feels wider. Even discomfort, if it exists, feels less personal, more like weather passing through. Zen sometimes uses the phrase like a thief in an empty house. When thoughts arrive and find nothing to cling to, they leave quietly. Sleep works the same way. It does not force entry. It waits until the house is no longer guarded. There is nothing left to defend, no position to maintain, no state to achieve. Just this gentle descent into the ordinary miracle of rest. If a thought arises now, it does not need correction. If a sound appears, it does not need naming. If awareness remains, it does not need direction. The pond holds the moon without effort. The bell fades without regret. The night continues without instruction. And you, without needing to do anything at all, are already resting more deeply than you realize. You do not cross into sleep all at once. There is no single moment where the waking world shuts its door and the dreaming world opens another. Instead, there is a gentle overlapping like dusk, settling slowly into night without announcing itself. A Zen teacher once described this transition as the sound of footsteps fading while the walker is still nearby. Nothing vanishes suddenly. Everything simply becomes less demanding. You may notice now that thoughts no longer arrive in neat sentences. They drift in fragments. A color without a source, a place without context, a feeling without a clear reason. This is not confusion, it is loosening. Long ago, in a coastal monastery where mist rolled in each evening from the sea, an old monk was known for falling asleep wherever he sat. Visitors often mistook him for careless or inattentive. During teachings, his head would nod. During meals, his eyes would close between bites. One student, concerned that this reflected poorly on the monastery, finally asked the abbot if the old monk should be corrected. The abbot smiled and said, "He is not asleep, he is resting in the middle of activity." Historians still argue whether this monk was practicing an advanced form of non-dual awareness, or simply very comfortable with fatigue. The records are unclear. What is clear is that no one ever had to wake him. When the bell rang, he moved. When spoken to, he answered. When night came, he went to bed without resistance. He did not cling to alertness. Most people do. There's an unspoken belief that awareness must be maintained, monitored, protected. That if attention slips, something important will be missed. But notice how little truly requires your vigilance right now. The room is stable, the night is settled. Nothing is asking for a decision. The body recognizes this before the mind does. Muscles that were quietly holding tension begin to release in layers. Not all at once, one place at a time. Shoulders soften, hands rest heavier, even the tongue finds a more comfortable position. Breathing grows less noticeable. Zen texts rarely instruct students to relax. Relaxation implies effort. Instead, they speak of ceasing to interfere. A master once told a restless novice, "You are tightening your fist around empty air. When you let go, you will not lose anything." The novice spent months trying to understand this. One night, exhausted from effort, he fell asleep mid-meditation. The next morning, he laughed, not because he had achieved something, but because he realized he had been guarding nothing. Sleep often arrives the same way when guarding stops. You might feel as if you are still awake. That is fine. You might feel as if you are halfway somewhere else. That is also fine. There is no correct position on the threshold. In some monasteries, her monks were encouraged to sleep sitting up during long retreats. Not to demonstrate discipline, but to observe how easily consciousness shifts when the body is supported and effort is minimal. Many reported the same thing. The moment they stopped trying to stay upright, sleep came. The moment they stopped trying to sleep, rest deepened. It is not a paradox meant to be solved, it is a pattern meant to be noticed. Your mind may still produce the occasional thought. It might test old concerns, replay fragments of the day, or introduce an unrelated image with surprising clarity. This does not delay sleep. It accompanies it. Like leaves floating on a river, thoughts can move without carrying you along. You do not need to follow them. You do not need to push them away. The river already knows where it is going. Earlier, effort shaped your attention. Now attention no longer needs shaping. The body has shifted into maintenance mode. Heart rate slows. Internal systems prioritize repair rather than action. Sensory input is still registered but less emphasized. Zen scholars sometimes refer to this as functional awareness without ownership. Sensation continues, perception continues. But the sense of someone managing it all begins to fade. This is why sleep can feel like falling backward into something supportive. There is no ground to hit, only support you did not notice before. A lesser-known teacher from northern Japan used to tell his students, night practice is simply allowing yourself to be held. Held by the mat, held by the air, held by the quiet agreement of the world, not to ask anything of you right now. You may feel that agreement settling in. Even the idea of listening becomes softer. Words no longer demand interpretation. They pass through like wind through open doors. If awareness dims, that is not a problem. If it remains, that is not a problem either. Sleep does not require permission. It recognizes readiness. And readiness is not measured by exhaustion alone, but by the absence of resistance. Nothing more is needed. No technique, no insight, no final understanding. Just the ordinary, unremarkable act of letting the night continue on its own. And as it does, you drift, not away from anything, but gently into what has been waiting all along. By now, even the idea of drifting has begun to lose its shape. There is no clear direction anymore. No forward movement, no backward release. Just a gradual thinning of effort, like fog dissolving without deciding where to go. A Zen saying describes this state simply, the ox has wandered off. The field remains. You do not need to know what the ox represents. No one ever fully agrees. Some say it is the mind, others say it is intention. A few insist it is nothing at all. What matters is the field. Fields do not hurry, they do not prepare. They receive whatever passes through light, shadow, rain, quiet. You are resting in that kind of openness now. Thoughts may still appear, but they arrive without urgency. They no longer insist on being finished. A sentence begins and never ends. An image flickers and dissolves. Even memory loses its usual pull as if the mind has set down its grip. This is not the loss of control. It is the discovery that control was never required. There is a story, rarely written down, passed mostly by word of mouth, about a monk who asked his teacher how to remain aware during sleep. The teacher answered, "Why would you want to?" The monk explained that he feared missing something important. The teacher nodded and said, "If it is important, it will wake you." That was the entire teaching. Historians still argue whether this exchange actually occurred or whether it was created later, to illustrate Zen's distrust of unnecessary vigilance. Either way, the message remains quietly intact. You do not need to supervise rest. The body has its own intelligence, far older than thought. It knows how to descend into stillness. It has practiced this every night of your life, even when the mind protested. Notice how the sense of having a body feels different now, less solid, less specific. The edges blur. Sensation spreads out, becoming more diffuse, less localized. Hands feel warm but distant. Feet feel heavy but unimportant. Breathing continues, but no one is counting. This is not numbness, it is integration. Zen texts sometimes refer to this as the body forgetting itself, not disappearing, but no longer needing commentary. In waking life, the body is constantly named, posture corrected, sensation evaluated, comfort adjusted. In rest, naming stops. Experience continues without labels. You may notice brief moments where awareness fades entirely, followed by a gentle return. These are not interruptions. They are doorways opening and closing on their own. Sleep often arrives in waves, not a single plunge, but a series of small surrenders. Each time you do not react to the wave receding, the next one carries you further. A teacher once described this as learning not to stand back up, not collapsing, not forcing descent, simply not re-engaging. You are doing this naturally now. There is nothing left to check, no signal to wait for. The world has narrowed to something very simple: quiet presence without a center. If a sound arises, it floats. If silence deepens, it holds. If a dream begins forming, it does so gently, without asking for attention. Zen does not treat dreams as obstacles or revelations. They are weather passing through the same open field. Some monks reported vivid dreams during long retreats. Others reported none at all. Teachers did not interpret either as progress or failure. Dreaming, one master said, is the mind stretching its legs. There is no need to follow it. You might already be halfway inside a dream without realizing it. Logic loosens, time folds, a place appears without distance. This is not a problem to solve. It is a sign that the night has taken over where effort once lived. If awareness remains, it remains softly. If it fades completely. Both are forms of rest. The field does not prefer one to the other, and neither should you. There is nothing left to understand here, nothing left to release, nothing left to maintain. Just this quiet continuation, unfolding without supervision, carrying you further into the long night where nothing needs to happen and nothing is missing. At this point, even the sense of passing time has loosened. Minutes no longer stack themselves in order. There is no clear before or after, only a soft continuity like water, moving without measuring distance. A Zen teacher once compared this state to sitting beside a river at night. You cannot see the current, but you know it is there because everything else grows quieter around it. You may notice now that effort has almost completely withdrawn. The mind no longer checks itself. The body no longer adjusts. Breathing continues, but it feels as though it belongs to the room rather than to you. This is the space Zen sometimes calls no residue. Nothing from the day is being carried forward, not because it was resolved, but because it was set down. There is an old account of a traveling monk who arrived at a mountain hermitage just as night fell. He asked the hermit if he might stay until morning. The hermit nodded and said, "You may stay, but do not bring your thoughts inside." The monk agreed, though he had no idea how to do that. That night, lying on a simple mat, he noticed that every time a thought arose, the body tensed slightly. When the thought passed, the body softened again. After a while, he stopped reacting. Thoughts came and went without consequence. In the morning, the hermit asked how the night had been. The monk replied, "Very quiet." The hermit smiled and said, "Then you left your thoughts outside." Historians still argue whether this story was meant literally or metaphorically. Some interpret it as instruction in embodied awareness. Others believe it simply points to the natural relationship between tension and thinking. Either way, the teaching is already happening for you now. The body has learned that it does not need to respond. Even if a thought arises, it does not trigger movement, evaluation, or effort. It passes like a sound heard from another room. Zen practice often emphasizes noticing the moment when response is optional, not eliminating response, but seeing that it is no longer required. Sleep lives in that space. You are resting there now. The sense of "I am listening" has softened into something more diffuse. Listening happens, but there is no listener standing apart from it. Words no longer ask to be followed. They arrive and fade without leaving a trace. If you notice this, there is no need to mark it. If you do not notice, nothing is lost. The body continues descending into deeper maintenance. Muscles settle fully into gravity. Small reflexes quiet. The nervous system shifts further away from alertness and toward restoration. Zen texts describe this as the gate without a guard. Nothing stands watch, nothing needs to. A lesser-known monk from a rural Chinese monastery once said, "When sleep comes, let it take the reins. It knows the road better than you." He was not widely quoted. His teachings were not recorded in formal collections, but students remembered how easy it felt to rest near him, how silence around him did not feel empty but sufficient. You may sense that same sufficiency now. There is no anticipation left, no expectation of what should happen next, just this steady settling like sediment, drifting to the bottom of clear water. You do not push it down, you let it fall on its own. Dream imagery may begin to appear more clearly now. Faces without names, places without geography, scenes that shift without explanation. This is not distraction. It is the mind turning inward without resistance. Zen teachers rarely analyze dreams for meaning. One famously said, "A dream is just another place the mind visits when it is not needed elsewhere." There is no need to follow, no need to interpret. The night does not require understanding. You may also notice brief gaps, moments where there is no thought, no image, no sensation you can identify. These gaps do not need to be extended. They are already complete. Trying to hold them would only invite effort back in, so you let them come and go like everything else. Earlier, you may have felt as though you were drifting. Now even that sense has quieted. There is no movement, only deepening stillness that feels stable rather than empty. The kind of stillness that supports rather than isolates. Zen sometimes uses the phrase resting in what remains. What remains is not a thing. It is the absence of needing anything else. If awareness fades completely, that is natural. If it flickers gently, that is natural too. The night does not judge either. Nothing in you needs to stay awake to allow sleep to continue. It is already happening on its own. And somewhere beneath thought, beneath effort, beneath even the idea of rest, the body continues its quiet work, repairing, settling, balancing without asking you to participate. You are free to disappear into it, or simply hover at the edge. Either way, nothing is required. The river flows unseen, the field remains open, and the long night carries you forward without needing your help. There is very little separation now between being awake and being asleep. The distinction has softened to the point where it no longer matters. Awareness drifts in and out like a slow tide, never announcing its movement, never asking permission. Zen sometimes describes this as the lamp still burning in an empty room. The light is on, but no one is inside checking it. You may notice that language itself feels heavier, slower, less precise. Words do not arrive with sharp edges anymore. They blur slightly as they pass, like shapes seen through water. This is not loss, it is easing. Long ago, in a forest monastery far from trade routes and cities, a teacher was asked what happens to the mind in deep rest. He answered, it returns to its original job. The student asked what that job was. The teacher replied, nothing. Historians still argue whether this was meant humorously or as a precise instruction. Zen often refuses to clarify such things. What matters is not the explanation, but the recognition that follows it. The mind does not need constant purpose. When it is not being used, it rests naturally. You can feel that now. The urge to track progress has faded. The idea of how deep you are has lost relevance. There is no scale here, no measurement, no finish line. The body has fully surrendered to gravity. It is no longer holding itself up. The weight you feel is not heaviness, but belonging. Breathing continues with long, uncounted pauses between movements. The chest rises and falls as if guided by something older than habit. Zen monks sometimes refer to this as breathing by itself. Not controlled, not observed, simply happening. If you try to notice it, it slips away again. That is fine. Nothing needs attention. There is an old teaching about a master who was asked whether enlightenment continues during sleep. He replied, sleep does not interrupt what was never started. This is not meant to be mysterious. It is meant to be relieving. You are not responsible for continuity. You are not required to remain present. The night holds everything without supervision. Thoughts now appear rarely, and when they do, they lack weight. They feel like echoes rather than statements. Even curiosity has quieted. You are no longer asking what comes next. You are no longer waiting. In some traditions, this is called the Great Settling. Not a collapse, not an achievement, just a return to baseline, the baseline that existed before effort learned to interfere. You may notice that even the sense of location has softened. The room feels distant. The body feels less defined. There is no clear center where experience gathers. Zen texts sometimes describe this as no head, no tail. Experience continues, but without orientation. This is why sleep feels spacious rather than confining when it arrives without struggle. Dreams may begin forming fully now, or they may not. Either is fine. If dreams come, they come quietly. If they do not, rest deepens anyway. There is nothing you need to do to ensure either outcome, a teacher once said. When you stop leaning forward, you discover you were already supported. You have stopped leaning. There is no need to listen closely anymore. There is no need to follow the sound of the voice. Even the act of hearing has become secondary. The night has taken over completely. If awareness fades, now it fades gently. If it lingers, it does so without effort. Nothing is disturbed. Nothing is incomplete. The long night does not ask you to stay. It simply continues carrying you with it as naturally as breath carries oxygen, as gravity carries weight, as sleep carries the body into restoration. And whether you notice it or not, you are already resting as deeply as you need to. There is no clear edge anymore, no boundary you could point to and say, here, this is where sleep begins. What remains is a gentle suspension, like floating without noticing the water. Zen teachers rarely describe this state directly. When they do, they use language that sounds almost too simple. One step past tired, one master said. Before dreaming after effort, said another. Neither explanation was meant to be precise. Precision would only wake the mind again. You may notice now that even the sense of listening has thinned. Sound arrives, but it does not gather. Words pass through without forming meaning. The voice is no longer something to follow, only something moving in the same quiet space as everything else. The body has settled fully into its night rhythm. Muscles are no longer guarding. Small adjustments have stopped. The nervous system has released its last signals of readiness. This is why the body feels both heavy and absent at the same time. Zen sometimes calls this the body sleeping, the world breathing. You are not doing anything to make this happen. It is simply the result of nothing standing in the way. There is a story told about a monk who asked his teacher how to know when he was truly at rest. The teacher replied, "When you forget to ask. That moment is near now. Curiosity has dimmed. The urge to check your state has softened. Even the desire for sleep has become unnecessary." Sleep does not arrive because it is invited. It arrives because resistance has gone quiet. Thoughts may still appear occasionally, but they feel far away like lights on a distant hillside. They do not ask to be followed. They do not pull attention with them. If one appears, it dissolves on its own. If none appear, there is only openness. Zen texts sometimes refer to this as mind like an open hand. Nothing clenched, nothing held, nothing dropped, just openness without effort. The sense of time has almost completely dissolved. There is no countdown, no sense of duration. The night does not move forward. It simply deepens. Breathing continues slower now, with long pauses that feel natural rather than held. The space between breaths stretches gently, like silence between notes in a song that no one is trying to finish. You may notice brief flickers of imagery, shapes, colors, fragments of places that never fully form. These are not interruptions. They are signs that dreaming is nearby. There is no need to follow them. They will carry you if you let them. A Zen master once said, "The dream is not a mistake. It is the mind resting in pictures. If pictures appear, they appear. If they do not rest, still deepens. Nothing is missing. The body no longer feels like something you are inside of. It feels more like something you are gently resting within without comment. Even the idea of you has softened. There is no effort to maintain identity here." Zen practice often points to this without naming it, the quiet moment when the sense of self becomes optional. Not erased, not rejected, simply unnecessary. This is why sleep feels safe. Nothing needs defending, nothing needs explaining, nothing needs to be understood before letting go. If awareness fades completely, now that is natural. If it lingers faintly, that is natural too. The night does not require a witness. It continues whether anyone is watching or not. And as it does, you sink not downward, not inward, but gently away from effort into the deep, unremarkable peace that has always been available once nothing stands in its way. There is almost nothing left to describe now because description itself has become unnecessary. The mind no longer reaches outward. It no longer gathers impressions or arranges them into meaning. It simply rests open and unguarded like a window left ajar at night. Zen sometimes calls this the place before words. Not a place you go to, a place you stop leaving. You may sense that even awareness has changed its texture. It is no longer bright or focused. It feels wide, dim, and forgiving, like low light that does not demand clarity. The body is fully settled. There is no impulse to move, no impulse to adjust. Gravity has been accepted completely. Whatever surface supports you feels less like an object and more like part of the same quiet field. A teacher once said, "When the body agrees with the night sleep follows, your body has agreed." Breathing is now so gentle that it seems to happen somewhere else. The pause after each breath stretches naturally without concern. There is no sense of holding or waiting. Air comes when it comes, leaves when it leaves. Zen monks sometimes describe this as being breathed, not breathing. Being breathed. There is an old account of a novice who worried that he would disappear if he slept too deeply. He asked his teacher if it was safe to let go completely. The teacher replied, "You disappear every night. You always come back." Historians still argue whether this exchange was meant humorously or as a direct confrontation with fear of non-existence. Zen rarely explains itself fully. It allows the question to dissolve instead. You may feel now that the sense of self is barely present. Not gone, but unimportant. Like a name you no longer need to answer to. This and is not emptiness. It is simplicity. Nothing extra is being carried. The mind has stopped rehearsing. There is no reviewing of the day, no anticipation of tomorrow. Even memory has grown quiet, as if it understands it will not be needed until morning. Zen texts sometimes refer to this as closing the books. Nothing is being studied now. Nothing is being learned. The body has entered deep maintenance. Muscles soften completely. The jaw loosens further. The eyes rest deeply in their sockets. Small reflexes that kept you oriented have powered down. This is why the boundary between inside and outside feels less clear. The room no longer presses in. The body no longer marks space. There is just quiet continuity. Dreams may begin forming fully now, or you may sink beneath them into deeper dreamless rest. There is no preference here. Zen does not rank states of sleep. One teacher said, "Deep sleep is also the way." Another said, "Dreaming is the way wearing costumes." Neither required effort. You might notice that if a sound arises now, it does not startle. It passes through without rippling the surface of rest. The nervous system no longer treats stimuli as signals. This is not unconsciousness. It is trust. Trust that nothing urgent will happen without waking you. Trust that rest itself is safe. Trust that you do not need to monitor anything. Earlier effort was slowly set aside. Now even the memory of effort feels distant. There is no sense of "I should relax." Relaxation has already happened. There is no sense of "I am falling asleep." Sleep has already begun doing its quiet work. If awareness remains, it remains without commentary. If it fades without drama. Both are forms of rest. The night does not distinguish between them. A Zen master once wrote, "When nothing is required, everything is complete. Nothing is required now. No listening, no understanding, no participation. Just this deep, ordinary peace that has nothing to prove and nowhere to go. You do not need to follow the voice anymore. You do not need to stay present. You do not need to let go deliberately." The long night has already taken you in. There is a softness now that no longer feels new. It has become the background itself, like silence that stops being noticed once it settles fully into the room. Zen teachers sometimes say that at this stage, practice has already ended, but no one bothers to announce it. You may sense that even the idea of being here has thinned. Awareness drifts without anchoring. It does not look for reference points. It does not check itself against anything. This is not absence. It is ease. The body has reached a depth of rest where movement would feel unnecessary rather than forbidden. Muscles are loose in a way that feels final for the night. The face has smoothed itself out. Even the small muscles around the eyes have stopped signaling readiness. Breathing is now almost imperceptible, like a tide that no longer reaches the shore with sound. Zen monasteries sometimes describe this hour as the deep watch of no watcher. Nothing is being guarded. Nothing is being waited for. There is a story told in fragments about a monk who was assigned night duty in the meditation hall. His job was to stay awake while others slept, making sure the lamps stayed lit and no one needed assistance. One night, the abbot found him asleep in his chair. Instead of waking him, the abbot quietly extinguished the lamp and left. In the morning, the monk apologized, expecting reprimand. The abbot said, "The hall did not burn down. The night passed. What were you guarding?" Historians still argue about the meaning of this story. Some say it is about trust. Others say it is about the futility of vigilance when nothing is threatened. Either way, the teaching rests easily here. Nothing is threatened now. The world has narrowed itself to essentials, and even those no longer require your involvement. You may feel that the sense of inside and outside has almost dissolved. The room does not feel separate from the body. The body does not feel separate from the quiet. This is not disorientation. It is integration. Zen writings sometimes refer to this as one piece, not fragmented, not divided, just continuous. Thoughts, if they arise, are faint and slow. They do not finish themselves. They dissolve mid-formation like mist thinning before it becomes a cloud. You do not need to stop them. They are already stopping on their own. Dreaming may now be fully present, or you may have slipped beneath it into deeper dreamless sleep while still carrying a trace of awareness. There is no clear line between these states. Zen does not insist on one over the other. One teacher said, "Dreamless sleep is a temple with the doors closed. Dreaming is the same temple with lanterns inside. Both are quiet. Both are safe. If images appear now, they are soft and unbound. Places appear without geography. People appear without names. Events happen without consequence. There is no urgency, no story to follow. The mind has stopped trying to organize experience. Earlier, you may have noticed yourself listening, and now even that has faded. Sound arrives and passes without registering as sound. The voice is no longer separate from the silence it moves through. Zen texts sometimes describe this as hearing without ears. Not mystical, just unclaimed. The body continues its work without interruption. Repair deepens, systems rebalance. Energy is conserved rather than spent. This is why rest now feels heavy in a comforting way, like being wrapped in something that does not press or restrict. A monk once described deep sleep as being folded back into yourself, not closed, just held. If awareness flickers, it does so gently like a candle, veined through fog. It is not bright enough to demand attention, not dim enough to disappear completely. There is no need to adjust, no need to choose. The night accepts whatever state you are in. You may feel as though you are already far away, even though you have not gone anywhere. Distance here has no measurement. It is simply the absence of engagement. Zen sometimes points to this with the phrase "sitting nowhere." You are not located, and yet everything is accounted for. If you try to think about this, the thought dissolves before it completes itself. That is fine. Understanding is not required here. Earlier effort was gently set aside. Now even the memory of effort feels irrelevant. There is no one left to try, no one left to succeed. Just this steady continuation of night carrying you further into rest without instruction. If you wake briefly later, this place will still be here. If you do not, the night will still pass. Nothing depends on your awareness. Nothing depends on your attention. The long night moves forward in its own quiet way, and you move with it not as an action, but as a natural consequence of no longer holding yourself apart from rest. There is no longer a sense of arrival or departure. The night has evened out into something steady and wide, like a calm ocean with no visible shore. Nothing in you is reaching toward morning. Nothing is holding on to yesterday. Zen sometimes describes this as the middle of the middle, not the beginning of rest, not the end of wakefulness, just the place where effort no longer applies. If awareness is still present, it feels thin and spacious like light behind closed eyelids. It does not point anywhere. It does not gather information. It simply exists quietly without preference. The body is fully at rest now. Muscles have surrendered completely. The weight of your limbs feels final for the night, not heavy but unquestioned. Even the sense of breathing feels distant, as though the body has taken over entirely and does not need to report back. Zen teachers sometimes say when the body sleeps, let it sleep. You have let it sleep. There is an old account of a monk who worried that deep rest meant laziness. He asked his teacher how to tell the difference between true rest and avoidance. The teacher replied, "When rest is complete, there is no guilt. Historians still debate whether this exchange was meant as practical guidance or gentle humor. Zen rarely separates the two. What matters is the recognition that follows. There is no guilt here. Nothing has been postponed. Nothing has been neglected. Rest is not an escape. It is a return. The sense of self has become so light, it is almost unnecessary. There is no commentary about who you are or what you should be doing. Identity has loosened its grip, not because it was rejected, but because it was no longer needed. Zen texts sometimes refer to this as the coat left on the chair, still there, just not being worn. Thoughts now appear only as faint impressions, like the memory of a sound rather than the sound itself. They carry no momentum. They do not connect to one another. They fade before becoming anything you could follow. If a dream forms, it forms gently, without urgency or narrative pressure. Images may shift slowly. Scenes may rearrange themselves without explanation. You are not inside the dream. The dream is passing through the same open space as everything else. Zen does not instruct practitioners to control dreams or interpret them. One teacher said simply, "Dreams are what the mind does when it is no longer needed elsewhere. There is no reason to interfere. The night continues, deepening in its own way. Time has lost its structure. There is no sense of how long anything has lasted. The present moment no longer feels like a point. It feels like a field. Nothing moves through it with speed. Nothing presses against it. This is why rest now feels stable rather than fragile. There is no concern about waking up. There is no concern about staying asleep. Both concerns belong to effort, and effort has already stepped aside. You may notice that even silence feels different now. It is no longer something you notice. It is simply the condition everything rests in. Zen sometimes calls this the sound of nothing happening. Not dramatic, not empty, just sufficient. If awareness fades completely now, it fades naturally. If it remains faintly present, it remains without needing support. There is no correct outcome. The body continues its quiet work, uninterrupted. Repair, regulation, and balance proceed without awareness being required. Earlier, there was a sense of listening. Earlier, still a sense of drifting. Now there is only rest itself, steady and unremarkable. Nothing is missing from this moment. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be understood before letting go. The long night has settled fully around you, not as something separate, but as the space in which everything rests, and whether you notice it or not, this is exactly where you are meant to be. There is nothing left to transition into, no deeper layer waiting below this one. The night has settled into its fullest expression, quiet and complete, like a lake after wind has finally stopped touching its surface. Zen sometimes refers to this as nothing further, not because something ended, but because nothing is lacking. If awareness remains, it is no longer pointed. It does not observe. It does not reflect. It simply rests wide and diffuse like warmth spread evenly through a room. If awareness fades, it does so without absence. There is no sense of loss because nothing was being held in the first place. The body is fully given over to rest now. There is no tension left to unwind, no posture left to adjust. Even the sense of weight has softened into something neutral and familiar. Breathing continues slow and deep, but no longer feels connected to any intention. It is happening in the same way. The night happens naturally, without commentary. Zen masters rarely speak about this depths of rest. When they do, they tend to use phrases that sound almost dismissive. Just sleeping, one said. Nothing special, said another. But those who heard these words understood that nothing special was not a dismissal. It was the highest praise. The mind has completely stopped organizing experience. There is no effort to interpret sensations, no attempt to locate the self within them. Everything simply occurs or does not occur without evaluation. Zen texts sometimes describe this as the self put down, not destroyed, not denied, simply no longer being carried. You may notice now that even the idea of time has disappeared. There is no sense of waiting, no sense of passing. The night does not move forward. It simply remains. This is why deep rest feels timeless. There is an old story about a monk who slept through the entire night bell that usually marked the hours. When asked if he was disturbed by missing it, he replied, "The night rang itself." Historians still debate whether this was meant poetically or literally. Zen leaves that question open. What matters is that nothing important was missed. Nothing important ever is. Dreams, if they appear now, are slow and gentle. They do not rush. They do not demand attention. They feel more like scenery than stories. If dreams do not appear, the rest is even deeper. Zen does not privilege one over the other. One teacher said, "Dreaming and dreamless sleep are just different blankets. Both keep you warm. The sense of being here has dissolved into something softer. There is no location to maintain, no boundary to protect. The room, the body, the night all feel part of the same quiet continuity." Zen sometimes uses the phrase "no seams," nothing stitched together, nothing pulled apart, just one continuous fabric of rest. If a sound occurs, now a distant noise, a subtle shift, it does not ripple through the nervous system. It passes through the same way. Wind passes through tall grass, leaving no trace behind. This is not numbness. It is trust fully established. Trust that the body will wake when needed. Trust that the night can be entered without supervision. Trust that rest does not require vigilance. Earlier there may have been effort, then easing, then drifting. Now even those stages feel like memories from another lifetime. There is only this quiet, complete and entirely sufficient. Nothing needs to be done. Nothing needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to be held. The long night has fully taken you in, not as an event, but as a condition, steady, unremarkable, and deeply kind. Now there is nothing left to carry. The weight of the day, every conversation, every unfinished thought, every quiet worry has already been placed gently on the ground. You don't need to remember it. You don't need to sort it. The night knows how to hold what you no longer have to. Notice how your body feels right now. Not in detail, not with analysis. Just the general sense of being supported. The surface beneath you is steady. The air around you is calm. Nothing is shifting that needs your attention. Your breathing continues on its own slow and patient. Each breath arrives exactly when it needs to and leaves without effort. You don't follow it. You don't guide it. You simply allow it like waves reaching the shore long after the wind has stopped. Thoughts may still drift through from time to time. If they do, let them pass like distant lights seen from a train window at night. You don't need to recognize where they come from or where they go. They don't belong to you right now. They belong to the night. There is a deep kindness in this moment, a permission to stop becoming, to stop improving, to stop holding yourself together. You are allowed to be unfinished here. You are allowed to rest exactly as you are. If sleep is already wrapping around you, let it do so completely. There is no need to stay aware, no need to stay listening. You can drift as deeply as your body wishes. If sleep has not fully arrived yet, that is perfectly fine. Simply resting like this is enough. This quiet stillness is already doing its work, restoring you in ways you don't need to understand. Nothing important will be missed tonight. Nothing will slip away because you rested. In fact, rest is what allows everything else to fall back into place. Let the muscles of your face soften. Let your jaw rest. Let your shoulders sink just a little more. Feel how the body naturally knows how to let go when it is no longer asked to perform. The night stretches wide and patient around you. It is not rushing you, it is not guiding you anywhere. It is simply here, steady and reliable, the way it has been every night before this one. And as you move deeper into sleep or deeper into stillness, remember this feeling. Not as something to hold on to, but as something you can always return to. A quiet place, beneath thought, beneath effort, beneath the long day. For now, there is nothing else to do. Rest well.